The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a deepening shadow over the ocean. Sarah stood on the edge of the pier, her fingers tracing the polished wood as she stared out into the darkening waters. She had always been drawn to the sea, a mysterious and captivating force that beckoned her even as it filled her with a sense of unease. As a marine biologist, Sarah had spent years studying the ocean's secrets, yet no amount of scientific knowledge could dispel the primal fear that lurked within her. Whenever she ventured beneath the waves, it was a fear she had inherited from her grandfather, a grizzled old sailor who had spun tales of monstrous creatures and haunted ships. Tonight, the sea seemed particularly ominous. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale, ghostly light over the water. Sarah shivered, her breath forming a misty cloud in the cool night air. She couldn't explain it, but something felt different tonight, as if the ocean itself was calling to her. Ignoring her unease, Sarah turned and made her way back to her small research vessel, the Absol Explorer. Her crew was already on board, a group of dedicated scientists and divers who shared her passion for unraveling the ocean's mysteries. They were a close-knit group, bound together by a common purpose and an unspoken understanding of the dangers that lay beneath. The Absol Explorer glided through the calm waters, its light cutting through the darkness below. Sarah and her team were on a mission to explore a deep-sea trench that had recently been discovered. It was a place of unparalleled beauty and terror, where the pressures were crushing and the creatures that lurked in the depths were beyond imagination. As the submersible descended, Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The inky blackness outside the small porthole seemed to stretch on forever, a void that swallowed all light and sound. She gripped the armrest of her seat, trying to steady herself. "Keep your eyes peeled, everyone," she said over the intercom. "We're entering the trench." The trench was a world unto itself, a place where the laws of nature seemed to break down. Strange and otherworldly creatures drifted past the submersible, their translucent bodies illuminated by the vessel's lights. Sarah's team marveled at the beauty of the deep, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone down here. As they descended deeper, the pressure on the submersible increased, and the walls of the trench seemed to close in. Sarah's breaths came in short gasps, and she could feel the weight of the ocean pressing down on her. She glanced at the depth gauge. They were nearing a depth of 10,000 feet. Suddenly, the sonar pinged, and the crew's attention snapped to the screen. Something massive was approaching them from the darkness. Sarah's heart raced as she watched the blip on the screen grow larger and closer. "What is that?" one of the crew members whispered. The creature emerged from the shadows, and gasps of awe and fear filled the submersible. It was like nothing they had ever seen before, an enormous, bioluminescent creature with long, sinuous tentacles that seemed to stretch on forever. It moved with an otherworldly grace, its body pulsating with an eerie, ethereal light. Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke into the intercom. "It's a giant squid, but it's unlike any squid we've ever encountered. It's beautiful." As the giant squid circled the submersible, the crew couldn't tear their eyes away from its mesmerizing display of colors. But Sarah knew better. She had read the stories of sailors who had encountered such creatures and never returned. The creature emerged from the shadows, and gasps of awe and fear filled the submersible. It was like nothing they had ever seen before, an enormous, bioluminescent creature with long, sinuous tentacles that seemed to stretch on forever. This was not a mere encounter, it was a dance with death. Suddenly, the giant squid's demeanor changed. It turned its enormous and blinking eye towards the submersible, and a feeling of dread washed over Sarah. She had heard tales of the deep-sea creatures that were said to be sentient, intelligent, and malevolent. The giant squid's eye seemed to bore into her soul, and she felt a presence, ancient and malefic, probing her thoughts. She had heard tales of the deep-sea creatures that were said to be sentient, intelligent, and malevolent. The giant squid's eye seemed to bore into her soul, and she felt a presence, ancient and malefic, probing her thoughts. Then, with lightning speed, the squid's tentacles shot forward, wrapping around the submersible. The vessel groaned under the pressure, and alarms blared throughout the cabin. Panic shots filled the submersible as the crew struggled to free themselves from the giant squid's grip. The creature's tentacles were impossibly strong, and it began to squeeze the submersible, threatening to crush it like a tin can. "We have to do something," Sarah yelled, her mind racing for a solution. She knew that their only chance of survival was to somehow deter the giant squid, to convince it to release them. Desperation gave her courage, and she grabbed a bioluminescent lure from the equipment rack with trembling hands. She activated the lure, causing it to emit a pulsating, hypnotic light. She hoped against hope that the squid would be drawn to it. To her astonishment, the giant squid's eye fixed on the lure, and its grip on the submersible began to loosen. It released the vessel, and Sarah and her crew watched as the creature slowly retreated back into the abyss. But the encounter had left its mark on them. Sarah knew that the deep sea held many more horrors, and they had glimpsed only a fraction of its mysteries. As they ascended back toward the surface, the crew fell into a heavy silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Back on the research vessel, the crew debriefed and examined the footage they had captured of the giant squid. It was a momentous discovery, but it came at a price. They had seen the true face of the abyss, a place where beauty and terror were inseparable. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her bunk, haunted by the memory of the giant squid's eye, and the sense that it had looked into her very soul. She couldn't shake the feeling that they had intruded into a world that was not meant for humans, a world where ancient, malevolent forces lurked. As she drifted into fitful sleep, she heard a faint, haunting melody drifting through the walls of the ship. It was a mournful, ethereal tune that seemed to echo from the deep. Sarah's eyes snapped open, and she sat up in bed, her heart pounding. She knew that tune was the same melody her grandfather had sung to her as a child, a melody of warning and dread. The haunting song continued to play, growing louder and more ominous. Sarah followed the sound, creeping through the darkened corridors of the ship. It led her to the ship's bow, where she gazed out into the moonlit ocean. There, on the surface of the water, she saw them countless glowing eyes, like stars in the night sky, staring up at her. The eyes of the deep-sea creatures, the denizens of the abyss, had come to claim her. As Sarah watched in terror, the eyes began to rise from the depths, their spectral forms taking shape in the moonlight. The creatures of the deep, angered by her intrusion, had come to exact their revenge. Sarah's scream echoed across the dark waters of the ocean as she realized that there was no escape from the horrors of the deep, that the call of the abyss could not be denied, and that the ocean held secrets far more terrifying than she had ever imagined. And so, as the moon hung low in the sky and the haunting melody filled the night, Sarah and the Absol explorer were drawn down into the dark depths where the true horrors of the ocean awaited, hidden from the world above.